This is the Canon R5, the grail camera of 2020. Now in 2020, it was really hard to get your hands on one of these, but the few people who did got their hands on them had one big problem: overheating. Now the overheating problem has been talked about a lot the past few years, but it also has changed. I believe that the Canon R5 is still him. Let's start with the outside. Now the Canon R5 feels very similar to the Canon R6 and the R6 Mark II. Feels great in the hands, really good grip. One thing I don't like though is this LCD screen up here. It's very similar to the EOS R. Now if you look at a camera like the R6, it has this mode dial where you can go back and forth between the different modes. Now the R5, however, has this LCD screen and a mode button. So you click the button, then you use the screen to go ahead and change between modes. I don't know how I feel about that. I think part of me prefers the R6 and the physical dial. Now something weird about pressing the mode button and then going through the touchscreen just to change mode. It's weird. It's like the new Teslas nowadays got rid of the air conditioning dials and the volume dials and the wipers, and everything's controlled by the screen. There's something about having buttons and dials that just feels a lot better. Maybe I'm just old-fashioned. Now aside from that minor detail, it's built very well. Just like the R6, just like the R6 Mark II. They're built to last, they can go through a lot, and it just feels great when you're shooting with one. Now, if you go onto the ports, it's something that Canon really needs help with. Now, once again, another camera without a full HDMI port. Not even a mini, but they settle for a micro. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of micro HDMIs, but one thing that the Canon R5 can do that the R6 and the R6 Mark II cannot do is it can stream as well as record on camera. The HDMI output allows you to send a signal to a transmitter and also record on the SD card at the exact same time. This is something that I cannot get to work on the R6 or the R6 Mark II, no matter what I do. So the HDMI output is good, but it's still a mini. We need Canon to just make everything universally in HDMI full size from now on all their cameras, just like Sony's been doing. Now when it comes to the photo and video specs of the camera, it has a 45 megapixel sensor. It does 1080 and 4K up to 120 frames per second, and it even does 8K up to 30 frames per second. Now I've never used the 8K functions on here because 8K isn't the standard and the file sizes are large and almost impossible to edit. Now with all these video options, I know what you're thinking. If the camera overheats as soon as you start recording, there's no point. Now when it comes to the overheating, these are a lot different than the R6s and the R6 Mark IIs. Canon has rolled out multiple firmware updates since the release of the R5 in order to fix these overheating issues. I was able to test the R5 yesterday when I shot a wedding actually. I shot from 10 a.m. all the way to 11 p.m. That's over 12 hours of continuous shooting, and I shot 4K 60 the entire time. Now granted, I was doing a highlight video of this wedding, so I was doing it in clips. The R5 did not overheat a single time the entire day. Now if I were to shoot the same wedding with an R6, I would have to downgrade to 30 or 24 or even take a break between clips in order to keep that running time longer before the overheating starts. This R5 really impressed me though. Firmware updates, it really does work because I did not have a single issue with overheating at all. Now if you're shooting for longer periods of time, 30, 40 minutes at a time in 4K 60 or even in 8K, I'm sure it'll start to overheat a lot faster. But if you're doing clips like most people are, you shouldn't have any issue at all with the R5. When Canon first released it, they really marketed this camera as a video beast and this 8K footage and all of these video specs. That's how they marketed it. And so I really think that was their downfall, marketing it so much as a video-centered camera, when actually this camera is amazing when it comes to photos. I feel like this might be one of the best photography cameras Canon has. With all the talk about 8K and overheating, it's really easy to look over the photo specs. Now that's where I feel like this camera really does shine. I've said this before, but this is a 45 megapixel camera, which is amazing. But if you look at cameras like the R6 and the R6 Mark II, it's 20 and 24 megapixels. And in this day and age, megapixels really don't matter. Now, if you're cropping an image really tight, or if you need to print it up on a billboard, then sure, you might see some differences. But in most case scenarios, you really do not need 45 megapixels. Not only do you not need 45 megapixels, but it's also very large file sizes. If you're shooting events like sports or weddings or anything where you have, at the end of the day, where you have thousands of photos, this will be a nightmare. It'll fill up all kinds of SDs. You'll have to buy new SSDs. So if you'll be shooting thousands of photos and you don't have the storage, I wouldn't go for the R5. Now, if you have the storage capabilities and you're able to handle the 45 megapixel files, the image quality is unbeatable. It's one of the best image qualities I've ever seen in any Canon camera. The photos are sharp, you nail focus every single time, the dynamic range is amazing. Overall, for photos, again, one of the best Canon cameras for photos that they've ever came out with. The electronic shutter shoots bursts of 20 frames per second, which I get isn't as impressive as some of the Sonys out there that shoot 120. But all in all, if you're shooting 20 frames a second and you're still missing the shot, then the camera isn't the issue. So overall, as a video camera, it is extremely improved from when it first came out. And as a photo camera, it's probably the best on the market that you can get. I would have zero reservations about buying this. It is still that camera. It is still that grail camera everyone's trying to get their hands on, and it will not let you down, no matter what situation you're in, photo or video. Amazing camera all around, absolutely no complaints. So there you have it. Let me know if you plan on picking one of these up. It was a short video, but I hope you liked it. Canon R5 is him. Subscribe, like the video, and to the 5 people still watching, I'll see you next time.